of the many lands we meet from today at this LinkedIn Live. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And thank you for joining us for this 15-minute update on the Gender Equality Scorecard that the Workplace Gender Equality Agency launched today. The results, unfortunately, are very concerning. 22.8% was the gender pay gap last year. 22.8% is the gender pay gap this year. Progress has stalled, and when we look across the range of results we've seen from our employer census, a number of things are stalling. 41% of managers are women. This is a number that basically hasn't changed from last year. We still have the vast majority of our boards that are male dominated, and over 20% that have no women at all. We have had some positive progress though in a couple of areas. There's a small increase in the number of companies that are offering paid parental leave in addition to the government scheme, and an increased take-up of particularly male managers taking parental leave. And we think that's a good message back through organisations so that it changes the culture about supporting that sort of leave. We've also seen an increase from 19% to 22% of the proportions of CEOs that are women. It's a small increase off a very low base, but at least it's heading in the right direction. But this number has only increased by 5% over the last 8 years. And of course, we know at key management personnel, it's still heavily male dominated. And in fact, the gender pay gap is the equivalent of nearly $100,000 between men and women at that key management personnel level. So concerning statistics, concerning results, and the momentum that we have more broadly in the community is not translating through to momentum in the workplaces. There are there's some new data this year, and I did want to bring people's attention to that because it's always interesting on things that haven't been collected before. About half of companies are setting targets in relation to to a range of gender equality measures, and the main target that they're setting is the number of women in leadership. They're also setting targets about reducing the gender pay gap and increasing women in male-dominated roles. Interestingly, targets are not really very often being set to focus on men accessing the benefits of gender equality, such as increased flexible work or access to parental leave. In terms of parental leave, we asked some further questions. Last year we captured whether superannuation was being paid on paid parental leave. This year we find out that a quarter of companies have removed the distinction between primary and secondary carers. An important distinction once again to make paid parental leave accessible both to men and women. We also asked whether they have qualifying periods, and 86% of companies did require an average of 12 months in terms of qualifying. Now, obviously, the removal of qualifying period we think is very important, once again, because that qualifying period can limit women's mobility in terms of choosing to take a promotion or move to another role that might be at a higher level if they're trying to also get pregnant at the same time. And 78% of companies require that the parental leave is taken within a specific time frame. And once again, the vast majority of them are requiring it be taken within 12 months. It was also interesting, we asked about all roles flex and whether people were recruiting on that basis. What we know, of course, is that flexible work has increased. The formal policies in relation to flexible work has increased. Employers report an increased likelihood of approving flexible work. Another very important area, of course, for both men and women to be able to manage both home and caring and parental responsibilities as well as work. But 38% of companies that answered our voluntary question said that they're now advertising all roles flex so that people can choose when and where and how they work, and that ideally, of course, their performance is based on how they do the job, not on presenteeism. We ask companies about what they're doing to make sure that these all roles flex and flexible work generally is successfully embedded into an organisation, and that measuring performance is critical. 38% or a high number of companies are saying that they're doing all their meetings online or having that online option, and also making sure they're training managers, particularly in terms of how to manage teams that are remote or hybrid, so that it is an equal experience for all employers. So there's concerning results in terms of the gender pay gap. As I've said, 22.8%, $26,600 differential between, on average, what women earn and men earn. Some small glimmers of hope in relation to some of the policies and practices and the number of women who are CEOs, and some interesting new data. So I'm very happy to take some questions if people have them, and dig into the numbers or think about the implications more broadly. Now, I'm hoping we might have some questions. Lucy in our team is driving these questions and feeding them through. So I've had a question from Charlotte. Where do you think the most important shifts need to be made? Well, we know what the causes of the gender pay gap are from our work with KPMG on She's Priceless. So issues in relation to discrimination and bias, that's both in the recruitment and the salary levels and the promotions, but also about whether the culture of an organisation is creating a gender equal environment, how we make sure our managers have the skills and capabilities all the way through, just not at the top level, but all the way through an organisation to create those equal opportunities, equal environment, equal culture for women to be able to succeed. And that's particularly important at transition points. The second area, of course, is the time women take out of the workforce. That does obviously stop salary at that time, often stops increases, and that time out of the workforce is a contributor to about a third of the gender pay gap, and the capacity to return to work, whether that be in a part-time or full-time capacity. So we've got to change things. We've got to look at things differently in terms of what an executive and what a manager looks like. We've got very traditional notions of, 12-hour days and little flexibility, whereas we know particularly women need some of that flexibility. So can we have part-time roles at senior executive? There's very few of them now. It needs to change. It needs to have more capacity for people to be able to manage their caring and parental responsibilities as well as perform to the top of their skills and capabilities. Can we job share, for example? And there are a small number of examples of job sharing at very senior levels, which allow, once again, that flexibility in order to be able to make work. And the third thing is we have a highly gender segregated industrial structure, both in terms of masculinized industries generally being higher paid, and feminized industries like healthcare and social assistance, education and training being lower paid. And we've got to try and make inroads to reduce the gender stereotypes and the gender norms we have about the career paths for men and women. So there's some of the key areas we can do at a broader level. Of course, we also want companies doing gender pay gap analysis, understanding where their gaps are, driving that from a leadership perspective, and making sure the change can be addressed very proactively. So there's a few ideas, Charlotte, in terms of what we can do. We do have another question now, just in terms of what's coming up. Have we seen a shift in the proportion of women working casually or part-time? And we know that unpaid care contributes to the gender pay gap, and that women's workforce participation was hit harder by COVID. And there are some interesting statistics emerging. So overall, at no age or stage in life, more than 50% of women working full-time. And that's obviously very different from men. But interestingly, also more than 90% of those managerial roles are full-time roles. So we have this fundamental disconnect between the way women want to or need to work, and how we think about those leadership positions. So we haven't seen a big shift over time in the number of women part-time and casual working casually, it continues to be very highly feminized in terms of that part-time work. So we've got to change what's happening in workplaces, change how the opportunities that people have to both work part-time in meaningful and senior roles, so that we can make sure that women can fully participate to their full potential. The other thing that we've seen in this data is a very high level of mobility. So about a quarter of the employees in this census, over 1 million, resigned from their positions. And with that mobility comes a massive opportunity to fill some of those positions. We've had many companies say to us over the years, oh, we'd love to have more women in senior management, but we've got very stable, there's not the positions there. Well, when you've got such high mobility, those positions do become vacant. And there's an opportunity to address the gender imbalance at senior levels or all the way through in the recruitment that's happening from this time of high turnover. But we have seen more resignations from women than we have appointments and promotions. So we don't know fully whether those women are leaving medium to large businesses, which is what WGEA's Employer Census covers, and going to smaller businesses, or are they exiting the workforce altogether? Now, we know participation is up a little bit, so I suspect they're leaving some of those larger environments and having more flexibility or more choice in relation to working in smaller businesses or in their own business. Now, we've just had a question from Diana. Do you have insights into what the differences in progress look like from small to medium and very large organisations? Now, it's a good question, Diana, and the WGEA census does not cover employers with less than 100 employees, so your classic small business. And that's really been a reporting burden issue. We did have a look at that in our recent review of our Act, but the decision was made with COVID and all the challenges. Now is not the time to add an additional requirement on smaller businesses, although I think that will be revisited in the future. So we can see what we see from medium to large businesses. And there is a differential. When you look at especially larger businesses, capacity to pay parental leave, for example, have more flexibility in their workforce. There's much higher provision of those sort of policies in larger businesses than smaller businesses, or medium-sized businesses, I should say. But where the growth is actually in medium-sized businesses. So if we look over the life of the census over the last 9 years, the huge growth in parental leave provision has been in employers with 500 to 1,000 employees. So they're seeing it as a critical part of a reasonable and sensible gender equality offering, a source of competitive difference from others, and the need to offer those sort of support policies to make sure their staff can be both attracted but supported through life's many transitions, and that they can retain those staff over time. So we do see some differences, and we'll be doing some more analysis on our data over time on that as well. Now, from Peggy, we've had, can you please tell us more about how gender neutral and generous paid parental leave provisions can impact the gender pay gap? So what this is it's about an environment that's created where both women and men feel supported in terms of not just their work, but also the context in which they work, their lives and what they've got going on, can make a difference. And employers sending that message that we support those challenges and those transitions that you're making in your life. Therefore, we will put parental leave policies into place. And the more that they're flexible, the more that's going to enable both men and women to take it up. Now, what we know is that when men take parental leave over a reasonable period of time in those early months and years of their child's life, they actually significantly changes the nature of the unpaid work dynamic in the home itself, and men take on more of that unpaid load than they would otherwise. What that does, of course, is then free up the woman in the relationship to potentially think about returning to work or doing some work and having more capacity because of a reduction in the unpaid work requirement to be able to engage in the economy in whatever form that takes. So we think it's really important that parental leave provisions are provided flexibly in a gender neutral way that supports the way that parents want to manage their parenting responsibilities. It might be 1 day a week rather, over an extended period of time, or 2 days a week rather than full time, for 12 or 14 weeks at the beginning of having a child. That's an important message from employers in terms of attracting and retaining staff, but it's an important context to create an environment where women are supported to work if they're able to. So final question on intersectionality, really important question, Erin, in relation to that. There has been a review of our Act recently, and there's a number of things coming down the track as a result of that. We'll be able to publish gender pay gaps at an employer level, which we haven't been able to in the past, which will be great. At the moment, we just do it by industry and nationally. Larger companies, over 500 employees, will be required to set targets and report against the performance of those targets, and we will be collecting diversity data. We have to work with employers on how to do that because many don't even collect it themselves in the first place. Help that to be a collection that creates a safe, positive environment for employees to be able to report diversity data, and then those employers will be able to report it to us, which will enable us to do a much more nuanced analysis across the board in relation to men's and women's experience and people of all genders experience, and also at understanding the intersectionality issues in a much more nuanced way. So we're very positive about that. It's definitely a medium-term progress to try and work with employers to collect that data so they can report it to us, but will give us much more information over time. So thank you very much. Just a short and sharp session so that people can have a sense of the data. Please go and have a look at our Data Explorer on our website, which lists every company, not the remuneration data, but everything else in terms of their performance on their gender equality statistics, and download our scorecard from the website. Please engage in our social media, and thanks for joining us today.